When you are in a time of political transition like the United States is right now, you take a moment and you think, how did we get here? How did we elect and now re-elect a TV personality to be our president? I mean, the United States, this is not anything new. I mean, we have had famous people as our president. There was Ronald Reagan and now Donald Trump. And I'm thinking, Denmark, have you ever had someone famous become one of your leaders? Not because they were super qualified as a politician and had a track record as a politician, but was just famous. Because this is a uniquely 20th century, second half of the 20th century phenomena. That's when Ronald Reagan became president and became a politician. Before that, he was a Hollywood star. Some people pejoratively say a Hollywood B-star, but still a B-star. I mean, if someone says, well, he's only a B-star, I'd love to be a B-star. That would be great because, you may not get the Oscar, but, you're in the picture business. That's pretty darn good. But before that happened, the United States did not elect famous people as our presidents. Our presidents only became famous because they were presidents. For example, Abraham Lincoln. No one really knew about him. No one was going to offer him an endorsement deal to sell soap or sneakers. He was a little-known Illinois politician who, in the 1860 Republican Convention, they brokered a deal where he was eventually elected. And then, after he was president, he became famous. And then he got shot and he became more famous. And then, as we grew as a country, he became even more famous, which didn't do him any good because he was dead. Then you also have people like Theodore Roosevelt and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Denmark, if you have not had a famous person as one of your political leaders, maybe you ought to give it a try. I mean, we have, and at some point you can't control it because the media, with the confusion and the morass and the desire to produce a media figure, will produce someone who is famous and people will begin to trust. So I figured, well, Denmark, you ought to just get comfortable with the idea that it may happen. So I've been thinking, who of these Danish celebrities could become a politician? Who would be worthy of it? And the first one that comes to mind is Mads Mikkelsen. He seems like a very nice guy. And he's a role model. Carolyn Wozniak. Now, the problem, Carolyn Wozniak has a very difficult name to pronounce. It's not like Reagan, Trump. But she was an athlete, and the United States have had athletes as their politicians. For example, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the bodybuilder, Jim Bunning, the Hall of Fame pitcher, Steve Largent, the NFL Hall of Fame receiver. I wish H.C. Anderson was still alive. Now, H.C. Anderson would be a great politician. Why? Because he deals with stories and spin, and that's what Donald Trump does. And you could probably say that H.C. Anderson, who dealt with fairy tales, is very much like Donald Trump, who also deals with fairy tales. Though I have to say, very grim and scary fairy tales. I also kind of like Neil Bohr, but he's a scientist and probably is too logical to deal with politics and also wouldn't want to put up with it in the first place. Now, the one person I have saw in Denmark, in the Danish people, who probably is the most Trump-like is Bridget Nielsen. Now, before she became Bridget Nielsen, and I say before she became Bridget Nielsen, before she became Bridget Nielsen, the commodity, she was probably, I gathered she was a very nice girl. She was a handball player on the Danish national team. And then she got involved in the Hollywood franchise, and she married Sylvester Stallone, And after you do this and you start to franchise yourself and sell yourself out to get roles and to get media attention, you lose a certain amount of perspective. And I'm sorry, that's just what's happened. I feel bad for Bridget Nielsen. But she may have to do until someone produces the Danish version of The Apprentice. Now, I'm not so sure that the people in Denmark would have the same kind of respect, over adoration that the Americans have for Donald Trump, which is probably the reason why they're not going to have a celebrity politician. Now, you may think this is rather silly because you're in Denmark and you still have your values have not been eroded, media values have not been eroded. But in my country, this Danish, and I talked to my Danish girlfriend about this, you almost have to be a media figure to be a politician. You get a little sound effects of the chaos of New York City, but you have to be a media figure to be a politician. You may not have had to be a media figure to become a politician, but once you become a politician, you have to be a media figure. Now, that's not quite true because our prospective Secretary of Defense, besides being a soldier, was the anchor of a Fox News newscast. Now, what does a newscast have to do with running the Pentagon? I'm not quite sure. In fact, I think if you are a newscaster on an opinionated, biased network like Fox, it's not going to help you. Now, on the other side of the aisle, there's AOC, who really, she loves herself. And I look at that, I go, I wish I could love myself as much as AOC. And AOC said, after she'd been in politics, and I think she realized it was not fulfilling her great need for attention. She says, I think I would have rather been a movie star. Problem is, a movie star, it's fickle, and it's only as good as your last picture. And judging by what happened this election, her picture did not do well at the box office. And of course, because we've had Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump, we are waiting to see who is the next Donald Trump. I mean, who is it? Because if that's our pattern, it's obviously going to happen again. And I'm just waiting. And I look out at the media landscape and I go, who is it? Who is that person? Who is that 20, 40-year-old person who's percolating through the zeitgeist of America and who is going to be given the mantle of being so adored that they have to become president? I don't have that kind of crystal ball. I wish someone did, because I want to know who is going to lead our country in 20 or 30 years.